Amazing discovery. CEO exposes hidden truth after a little girl's touching plea in the snow. John Matthews had built a reputation, a titan of industry anchored in steel and profit. But here he was, stepping gingerly through the frostbitten streets of his childhood Midwestern town, where derelict buildings whispered bitter tales of lost dreams. The sharp chill of nostalgia turned his stomach. He thought of the countless families struggling, and his pulse fired with familiar shame. Success felt hollow now. Each day in his high-rise office felt like a betrayal of the hopeful boy he used to be. He stumbled upon a quaint little park, draped in winter's soft white blanket. The air smelled of pine and ice. In this nostalgic haze, his eyes caught a small figure, a girl kneeling in the snow. Grace. Her cheeks were rosy, and she donned a threadbare coat, far too thin for the biting cold. There was an intensity in her every movement. Her little hands balled snow into snowballs, the promise of a snowman looming in her focus. Want some help? He found himself voicing before he could rethink the offer. The innocence of her gaze, filled with determination, resonated within him. No thanks. She chirped, her voice a clear bell amidst the silence. I'm building it for my brother. That simple declaration struck a painful chord. The spirited anticipation in her eyes juxtaposed with the weight of responsibility was a mirror reflecting his own childhood struggles. His heart squeezed. A snowman, huh? What's your brother's name? Sam, she replied, her small hands forming the next snowball. I'm saving up my pennies so he can get a warm coat. Her selflessness hung in the air like a blaring alarm. He couldn't shake the mechanical delight with which he watched numbers rise on balance sheets. How many employees had the company let go to squeeze profits higher? As the words settled in the silence, unease began clawing at him. He had climbed this ladder while others had slipped through cracks. Now it felt like those cracks were as deep as the graveyard of unfulfilled dreams behind him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. John's chest tightened as he watched her lean into the process. Each snowball she shaped seemed to carry more than just powdered ice. It was as if they were molded from the very essence of hope. The sincerity of her intent kicked memories up like ashes from a fire. What had he sacrificed to ascend? He had conformed to every expectation, molded into the suit of corporate success, leaving who he truly was buried under layers of ambition. His mind raced. Should he continue this charade, nurturing the collective ego of prosperity while turning a blind eye to Grace's family? Or would he confront the very system he had orchestrated? As Grace reached for that last snowball, the weight of his success bore down, and suddenly, every board meeting, every acquisition felt tainted, marked by the stark contrast of her innocent plea. John, you need to hear this. There's something you don't know. The familiar voice cut through the chilling silence. He turned to see a former classmate standing stark against the white backdrop. The urgency etched on her face beckoned, but what could she possibly reveal? In that moment, with the stakes rising like the snowflakes swirling around them, he stood teetering on a precipice, heart gripped by the knowledge that the past might just unravel the very fabric of his reality. John's eyes shifted back and forth between Grace's unwavering focus on her snowman and the intensity in Sarah's features. It was a battle of distractions, the purity of a child's creation against the turbulence of uncertain revelations from someone he had not seen in years. What do you mean? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper, not fully understanding what was at stake but needing to know. The urgency in Sarah's tone hinted at something pivotal, something that could alter the very foundations of his existence. Sarah stepped closer, her breath visible in the frosty air, forming fleeting clouds that dissipated into nothingness. It's about your company, she said, gripping his arm with an intensity that startled him. I've seen things, John. Things you need to confront. Her words spun a web of dread around him. His company was his pride, a testament to years of hard work and sacrifices. Yet, guilt gnawed at him, and the weight of Grace's innocent ambition contrasting sharply with the corruption lurking beneath the surface of his empire threatened to unravel him. Like what? He pressed, unable to contain the mix of fear and intrigue drawing him in. There's a reason you're feeling this, Sarah urged, her eyes piercing through the suffocating veil of his corporate armor. Every decision you've made has consequences, and many are devastating for the people who depend on you. You might not have seen it before, but it's time to open your eyes. He could feel the flush of anger tinged with shame rise in him. Was she implying he'd been blind? His thoughts raced. He was the one who led the company to unprecedented heights. What had he sacrificed to reach this pinnacle? Grace paused in her snowball construction, looking up at him, her innocent gaze brimming with untainted belief. In her world, he was a man determined to make her brother's winter warmer. But in his world, he was becoming increasingly aware of the bitter fallout of his corporate maneuvers. I've heard about the layoffs, the way people have been discarded for the sake of profit, Sarah continued, her voice lower but no less urgent. Do you even know how many families are affected? How many children are left in the cold? It's not just about numbers, these are lives, John. A churning tumult swelled inside of him. He had been continuously scaling the wall of success, but now he felt the cracks beneath him. Piece by piece, the reality of his past decisions was coming to light, unsettling the carefully constructed narrative of his success. I didn't know, he started, but the words faded into the realization that ignorance was no excuse. His leadership had not created a space for empathy. As Sarah's piercing gaze held him captive, a long-forgotten part of himself flickered to life, buried in the dust of ambition. When had he last felt a sense of responsibility towards others? I can help you, John. But you need to want to face it. You have the power to change things, to use your success for more than just profit, Sarah urged, her voice steadier now, like a lifeline being thrown into turbulent waters. The chill wrapped around him, reflecting his internal struggle. Could he truly take the leap into uncharted waters? Clarity flooded him, a vision that transcended numbers, a chance to redefine his legacy. A new conviction simmered within him as he turned to Grace, who was now gazing back expectantly, her tiny hands still clutching the remnants of snow. He thought of her unwavering determination and sacrifice. I will, he heard himself say, almost as if the decision had been waiting to erupt from within him. I'll confront this. But the very instant the resolve solidified, a voice murmured from the depths of his mind. What would that confrontation cost him? The road ahead hazed with uncertainty, yet he could already feel the shattering of his old self beginning. As he faced Sarah, he understood the battle was only just beginning, and the unnerving truth lay in wait. Let us talk, he said slowly, but there's something else I need to uncover first. With that, he turned from the innocence of the snowman, a reminder of the past that had molded him, and focused on the path of painful revelations ahead, knowing that the truth could bring both redemption and turmoil. Suddenly, in that silence punctuated by the crunch of snow beneath his boots, a flicker of something dark loomed in his thoughts like a storm on the horizon. What unearthly secrets awaited him in the shadows of his company? As John walked away from Grace's snowman, a weight pressed on his chest, the chill seeping into his bones became almost unbearable. He needed to make sense of Sarah's warning, but what exactly did it all mean? The clarity he briefly experienced felt evasive, an illusion under the harsh glare of reality. With every crunch of snow beneath his feet, conflicting thoughts battled within him. The facade of success he had cultivated for years was beginning to feel like an elaborate house of cards ready to collapse under the slightest breeze. He found himself torn between the ambitions that propelled him forward and the deepening sense of guilt weaving through his heart. Confronting this, he muttered through clenched teeth, what does that even mean? Sarah had urged him to look beyond profit, to understand the humanity behind the numbers. Yet, could he afford such introspection? The sudden concern for the welfare of those he had appointed he had once disregarded felt like a betrayal to everything he believed had gotten him to this point. As he approached his car, the steady thrum of the engine was drowned out by his racing thoughts. His phone buzzed in his pocket, disrupting the storm within, pulling him back to the moment. The screen displayed the company logo. Was it a call from a colleague, a reminder of the next big meeting? He hesitated, then swiped to accept the call, the sounds of muffled chatter on the other end setting off alarms in his mind. John. We need you back in the office right away. There's been talk of more layoffs, his assistant's voice crackled through, punctuating the urgency. Sweat prickled at the back of his neck. He had known this day would come. The financial forecasts he'd signed off on were public knowledge. Each decision had led them closer to this precipice, yet it felt completely different now, a consequence waiting to unfurl. Are you serious? More layoffs? His voice trembled slightly. He gripped the steering wheel as if it could steady his spiraling thoughts. Yeah, the finance team is pushing it. They think we can cut costs further, you know how it is, she replied, careful not to betray her own disquiet. John ended the call, staring blankly at the dashboard as panic washed over him. How could he possibly condone yet another wave of job cuts when their impact leered before him like a specter? His mind raced back to Grace, so full of hope in her small creation. He had made promises a world built for her and countless others just like her, now at the mercy of bottom lines and profit margins. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, frustration cascading within him. For years, he had defined success through the lens of ambition and growth, but now he faced a stark and unsettling realization. He could no longer prioritize wealth over well-being. The chilling effect of Sarah's words echoed as he started the engine. He glanced at the snowman through the rearview mirror, resolving to pull back the curtain on what had become a hollow definition of success. It was time to rethink his priorities. To confront the dark underbelly of his company. To challenge the very foundation on which it was built. As he drove back, adrenaline surged. Plans formed and dissipated, hesitations wrestled with his emerging resolve. He needed to reach out to those employees who had been the backbone of his success, to the communities he had neglected. If confronting the truth was going to be painful, then perhaps he could channel that pain into something constructive. But the shadows loomed larger. What threatened to surface alongside these revelations? Were there alliances to be severed, truths to be unearthed that might shake the core of his existence even further? John felt the tension coil within him, vibrating with the possibility of both salvation and destruction. The potential for redemption hung tantalizingly before him, but it was intertwined with unknown adversaries lurking in the corridors of his company, plotting their countermeasures. The moment he stepped through the doors of the familiar office, he knew he was walking into a battlefield, and the destiny of his empire and his soul hung in the balance. The time had come to face what he had created, but would he emerge from the flames as a phoenix or be consumed entirely? The office hummed with the usual buzz of productivity, yet John felt a dense silence settle over him. Each face that turned his way was a mosaic of expectancy and unease, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Would he support the impending layoffs? An uncomfortable heat swelled within him, driven by the knowledge that these decisions, once merely numbers in spreadsheets, now bore a heavy emotional weight. He took a deep breath, preparing to unburden himself. I need a meeting now. His voice cut through the murmur, commanding both attention and concern. Employees filtered into the conference room. Each step felt like trudging through thick mud, his heart pounding against a backdrop of dread. As they assembled, he caught fleeting expressions mirrored in their eyes, apprehension, curiosity, and perhaps a sliver of hope. Sitting at the head of the table, John clenched his fists and spoke. I understand that we are at a critical juncture. The finance team has proposed more layoffs, but I want us to pause and reconsider. The room felt charged, the air thick as he scanned their faces. Humans, not data points. Real lives, interwoven with stories and aspirations. Sir, we need to cut costs to stay afloat, one of the more junior managers interjected, his brow knitted in confusion. You know how the board is. This could be the difference between our survival and collapse. There it was, the rift between pragmatic survival and ethical responsibility laid bare for everyone to see. John's resolve flickered. I know the stakes, but we also have a responsibility towards our employees, our community. We cannot strip away the livelihoods of those who have dedicated themselves to this company. Murmurs escalated, opinions bleeding into one another. Some agreed with John's sentiment, fervently advocating for an alternative approach. Others remained skeptical, voicing the cold reality of the financial numbers. He had anticipated this conflict but was unprepared for how intensely it would gnaw at him. Let us think about our values. What does our company stand for? Another colleague challenged him, encouraging the room to think beyond spreadsheets. This moment crystallized John's internal struggle. He needed to confront not just the company's fiscal reality but also the ethical integrity of their collective mission. Still, doubts pierced through his combativeness. In the middle of this turmoil, John realized he had to be more than just a decision-maker, he had to be a leader. His thoughts drifted back to Grace's snowman, to her anticipation and joy. What would she think if I made the choices playing solely to profit? The conversation shifted as John tapped into something deeper, recalling the human connections tied to every dollar on the balance sheet. I propose we gather input from those affected. Let us conduct a thorough assessment to explore every avenue before making such irreversible decisions. This isn't just about numbers, these are human lives we will impact. Staring into resigning faces, John felt a fire ignite within him. He was not merely fighting against an impending financial collapse, he was challenging a culture that prioritized profit over people. As the dialogue continued, he could see the tide slowly shifting. If he could leverage his influence to inspire a movement towards compassionate leadership, perhaps the dark underbelly of the company could be confronted openly. After the meeting, John sat in silence, reflecting on the moment's significance. The tension that had gripped his gut began to ease as a newfound commitment solidified within him. He had articulated a vision that encompassed both empathy and profitability. Yet, the realization bore down on him like an impending storm. People would resist change, and shadows of betrayal ran deep in his organization. Would his colleagues embrace this shift, or would he find himself alone and facing the fallout? He pulled out his phone, determined to reach out to those he had neglected. Numbers raced through his mind, calculations dancing with emotional stakes. Every call would echo back into the tumultuous sea he was about to wade into. But the shift had awakened questions he needed to confront. What adversaries would rise against him? As he dialed the first number, an unsettling feeling settled and the stakes were higher than he anticipated. The moment of truth loomed closer, and with it, the cascading consequences of his choices. Would this journey toward redemption imprison him further, or propel him to heights he'd never imagined? John paced the floor of his office, the glossy wood reflecting the evening light. He had always found comfort in routine, yet today felt remarkably different. His thoughts ricocheted with uncertainty as numbers scrolled through his mind, predictions, forecasts, human lives entwined with financial models. Every number now bore a name, a story, and that made the prospect of reaching out to his colleagues increasingly daunting. He imagined each call he would make, visualizing the varied responses that awaited him. The skeptical voices, the supporters, the silent indifference. The truth was he didn't know how each would react. Would they join him in this endeavor of compassionate leadership, or would his efforts be met with resistance, anger, or even betrayal? These questions gnawed at him as he prepared the list of names that lay before him. With a deep breath, he dialed his first number. The direct line to Samantha, a senior member of his team who had always been astute but critical. As it rang, doubt fluttered in his stomach. Would she brush aside his vision as idealistic, or would she grasp the weight of his proposal? "Hello, Samantha." His voice trembled slightly. "I wanted to discuss today's meeting. You know, the layoffs. I know what we're facing, John," she replied, a mix of sympathy and concern evident in her tone. "Do you think pausing the layoffs will really save us?" "I believe it could," he countered, tentatively stating his thoughts as he navigated through the murky waters of doubt threatening to pull him under. "We can collect feedback from those affected. Perhaps find ways to cut costs elsewhere." Samantha was quiet. "It's risky. But if it succeeds, it could be a game changer." Her voice was thoughtful, intrigued. In that simple reaction, John felt some of the weight lift, spurring his confidence. Each call after that started a flicker of hope. Conversations varied from robust discussions to hesitant agreements, yet they all descended into the heart of the matter. How could they appeal to both the financial realities and the human element intertwined deeply within the company? The deeper he discussed the notion of a genuine assessment, leaning on empathy rather than cold calculations, the more he realized he was redefining the expectations for himself, for them. Later that evening, he sat with a steaming cup of coffee, scrolling through his notes. A flicker of an old idea surfaced. What if they shared personal stories from those who had been affected by layoffs in the past? A way to humanize the numbers. It was a revelation, a hidden competency he had yet to unearth, the power of narrative. Could narratives become their arc of influence? Suddenly, John's phone pinged with a notification. An email from the board regarding the upcoming meeting where the numbers would ultimately be deliberated. Anxiety clawed at him again. Would he find allies willing to take this leap of faith? Or would he face outright dissent? As he leaned back in his chair, the ambience around him shifted. The late sun cast long shadows across the room, a physical manifestation of his doubts reflecting on the wall. He recalled Grace's laughter, her innocent wonder, a stark contrast to the shadows he wrestled with now. If she were in his shoes, urging empathy before profit, what would she say? With rejuvenated zeal, he fired off a message proposing a strategy meeting with the board to present his vision. The moment felt pivotal, yet anxiety swelled in his chest. The tides of this struggle reached beyond corporate triangles, it pressed against the core of his values and judgment. Could he inspire this change when the stakes were higher than ever? As he clicked send, uncertainty dashed through him, mingling with excitement. The upcoming board meeting would be the crucible, testing not only their financial strategies but the very foundation of his leadership. Would he rally enough support to steer the company into a new future, or would this pursuit of a moral compass lead him to a daunting precipice from which he might not return? With a slight tremor in his hand, he stared at his screen. The impending confrontation with the board loomed ahead like a dark cloud, and with it, the unanswered question lingered: could he really hold steadfast to his convictions when the time came? The sun rose the next day, casting a soft glow through John's office window. He arrived early, an hour ahead of the scheduled board meeting. The quiet was deceptive, it seemed peaceful but echoed with mounting dread. As he sat alone, his mind raced through the various strategies he had prepared. He had notes, graphs, and heartfelt narratives, but the undercurrent of uncertainty gnawed at him. The enormity of the task ahead loomed large. He pulled out the story he had drafted about a past employee who had faced layoffs. Her struggles and resilience, along with her ability to swap jobs and find fulfillment elsewhere, sharpened John's focus. If told correctly, perhaps it could set the tone his colleagues needed to understand not just the numbers but the human aspect beneath them. But how could he convey that significance without sounding sentimental? Bewilderment swept through him. He needed to structure his thoughts into a compelling narrative without diminishing its import. As he paced the floor, preparing the points he would stress, his phone buzzed. A message from Samantha appeared. Looking forward to the meeting. Let's change the narrative together. Her words hit him like a shot of adrenaline. Just when he felt most alone, she was extending an olive branch. Did this mean he could trust her, or was it merely a surface-level agreement? That uncertainty crept back into his thoughts. Shaking off the momentary distraction, he reaffirmed his intent. The board would not expect an employee's personal narrative at a financial meeting. They would want numbers, projections, and strategies to stem losses. Yet, wasn't it vital to interweave those elements with humanity? John's heart raced at the thought of merging the two worlds' human stories against a backdrop of numbers. As the clock ticked down, he recalled Grace's unfiltered honesty. Her innocent inquiries often cut to the core of his introspection. How could someone so young remind him of the worth beneath the layers of corporate risk? Would his colleagues be as responsive to that truth? Perhaps it was time to embrace vulnerability. When he finally walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Stony faces greeted him, each member lost in their own concerns. His palms grew sweaty, and he felt the suffocating pressure of their expectations. But what was at stake wasn't just his career, it was the lives that would be impacted by their decisions. John cleared his throat, his voice steadying as he opened with broad observations on the company's current financial state. As he shifted into sharing the narratives, supported by data he collected, he noticed subtle reactions around the table. Heads nodded, eyes shifted. The figures no longer felt like mere abstractions but part of real lives. With each story, John felt his confidence deepen. He wasn't just presenting facts, he was inviting his colleagues to share in something larger, an empathetic vision of what their company could stand for. Yet, as he bared his motivations, a thought nagged at him: what if this fragile new connection crumbled under financial realities? As the dialogue unfolded, he challenged their preconceived beliefs about success driven solely by profit margins. Instead, he urged them to reflect on the legacy they wanted to leave. Would they choose short-term gains at the cost of human dignity, or would they redefine success through compassion? With discussions intensifying, he caught sight of Margaret, the board's chairwoman. An iceberg of skepticism shadowed her demeanor. She leaned back, arms crossed, watching him closely. Her presence loomed like an impending storm. Would she see the merit of his approach or dismiss it outright? Just as he took a breath to steer the conversation towards a hopeful resolution, she suddenly interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "What makes you think these stories will sway the board when lives are on the line, John?" The challenge hung in the air, a test he hadn't anticipated. This confrontation was more significant than he had prepared for. The moment spiraled into a battleground of convictions. John's heart raced, but he felt a flicker of clarity. The time had come to confront this moment and draw on his most authentic self. With her sharpness directing all attention toward him, he realized that this was not solely about the financials but the very essence of his leadership. Could he articulate everything he believed, even in the face of such formidable resistance? Would he have the courage to remain true to his narrative, whatever the outcome? As concern built in his chest, John's resolve solidified, knowing his response could either forge a path forward or condemn his aspirations. In that charged atmosphere, he readied himself to respond, the moment of truth hovering just out of reach. Would he stand firm, or would he falter under the weight of doubt? John inhaled deeply, the confrontation hanging in the air like a tempest waiting to erupt. Margaret's skepticism radiated through the room, provoking a swell of contradictions inside him. He had rehearsed data points, statistics, persuasive rhetoric, yet it was this moment of conflict that could redefine not only his career but the very ethos of the company. Because, he finally articulated, every word chosen with precision, these stories matter. They remind us why we do what we do. They transcend the spreadsheets and remind us of the real impact of our choices. The room was still, the tension thick enough to slice. He pressed on, fueled by determination mingling with anxiety. Leslie's journey, for instance, it embodies the essence of resilience. If we neglect the human side of our operations, we risk becoming an assembly line for profits alone. Margaret's gaze pierced through him, her silence more deafening than words. John squared his shoulders, channeling the quiet yet unwavering strength he had honed over years of introspection. He could feel the prickle of his colleague's interest surge slightly as he spoke, and he seized on the moment, sensing a shift. What good are profit margins if they lead to despair? We're not only stewards of this institution, we are custodians of the people's lives intertwined with our decisions. As he spoke, John watched his colleagues, observing their reactions carefully. Some leaned in, curiosity edging out skepticism. He respected Margaret's experience, a formidable force in the boardroom, and yet, for all her power, he sensed that behind her steely facade lay a flicker of doubt. This realization emboldened him. "Let me show you," he urged, pulling up images and testimonials from those affected by the company's financial decisions. "These aren't just stories, they resonate with our values. By understanding their struggles, we can reshape our strategies without sacrificing our humanity." He felt his confidence surging, but a nagging question loomed. Would his appeal to empathy sway cold business minds? Just as the flicker of hope ignited within him, Margaret interrupted once again, her tone unwavering. "This sounds noble, John, but where's the evidence? Are you prepared for the fallout if we prioritize narratives over numbers?" The weight of her scrutiny felt heavier now. He could sense the eyes of the board fixed on him, their judgment palpable. The notion of failure slipped into his mind, like an unwelcome guest. Would he risk everything, stepping into this untested territory of blending compassion with commerce? "I am prepared," he asserted, his voice steady yet impassioned. "But we must recognize the disconnect that comes from solely favoring profitability. Our employees' well-being and stories contribute to the innovation and growth that truly matter. We have to take a stand, and that begins with our next steps. John's heart surged. Here in this charged atmosphere, he reflected on how far he had come, how the voice, once internal, now found expression in external conviction. This was more than a presentation, it was a crystallization of his beliefs and an invitation for others to reflect on their own. As the meeting continued, he laid out the concrete action plans interwoven with his narrative, proposing regular employee feedback sessions and integrating personal stories into corporate strategy. The board began to engage more actively, each member contributed ideas, prompted by the stories he shared. They were investing not just in financial streams but in a philosophy that could redefine their company culture. The discussion deepened, highlighting real metrics alongside human impact while still acknowledging the need for financial prudence. It felt like a delicate dance, and as he guided them through it, John recognized his own transformation, the evolution from a hesitant manager to a resolute advocate for change. Yet amid this budding synergy, unrest still simmered. He turned toward Margaret, her expression inscrutable. The questions that had ignited his initial fears now festered as he pondered, was she truly engaged, or merely waiting for the right moment to strike again? As the meeting progressed, John caught his breath, maintaining his focus, aware that this confrontation would not resolve easily. The stakes remained high, and clarity began to slip from him again. The moment felt fraught with possibilities, yet lingering was the potent fear of derailing. Standing at this cultural crossroads, he understood that the true test of his leadership was still ahead. And then it crystallized a simple truth he hadn't fully embraced until now: to lead authentically was to risk everything. As the dialogue wrapped up, John's gaze met Margaret's, a silent question passing between them. It was then that he realized the summit of this journey was still far out of reach. Would he be ready to confront the final barrier, the one that might secure his vision or derail his ambitions altogether? John left the boardroom with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation thrumming in his veins. He could still feel the weight of Margaret's gaze, her skepticism sharpened his resolve yet gnawed at his confidence. The ambivalence of the meeting reflected an uneasy truce rather than a watershed moment. Yes, the board had engaged, but that was no guarantee of support moving forward. It felt as though he'd scored a small victory in a war that still lay ahead. Stepping into the bustling office, John searched for clarity amid the chaos of ringing phones and murmured conversations. His colleagues, enthusiastic over his presentation, surrounded him, but their well-intentioned praise felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, their approval stoked the fire of his conviction, yet on the other, it heightened the pressure to maintain momentum. What if the enthusiasm was fleeting? What if he couldn't spark a sustainable change? As he settled at his desk, an email alert pinged, drawing his attention. It was a message from Leslie, the employee whose story had resonated so deeply during the meeting. "Thank you for sharing my experience with the board," it read, "but I wonder if they really understood how our decisions impact lives. I hope it leads to real changes." The weight of her thoughts hit him solidly. He had utilized her narrative as a catalyst, but what if the intended change felt more ephemeral? Doubts began unfurling within him. Did he truly possess the fortitude to shift a corporate culture entrenched in profit margins? What if he failed the very people he sought to uplift? To quell the rising tide of uncertainty, he knew he had to take deliberate action. He needed to show not only the board but also himself that he could harness this newfound energy into something tangible. Focus flashed like a beacon in his mind. He would create a strategy session with key employees. A think tank to brainstorm initiatives driven by personal stories. Gathering a diverse team, John sat cross-legged on the floor of the spacious conference room, a deliberate attempt to elicit openness and creativity. He encouraged them to share their experiences. As voices filled the room, he could see the shift in their expressions, from reservation to enthusiasm. Each narrative painted a picture of perseverance, vulnerability, and triumph. The blend of personal tales and collective wisdom began to crystallize into actionable ideas. Yet as the session unfolded, his mind wandered to Margaret. How would she react to this shift? Could he afford to trust that these initial waves of enthusiasm could stand against her seasoned skepticism? The nagging worry gripped his chest. Her influence loomed like a shadow, threatening to eclipse the light of his vision. Days turned into weeks as the initiative took shape. John coordinated with HR to set up regular feedback sessions where employees could share their stories openly. He began to notice something peculiar: people bloomed in this environment of vulnerability. Employees approached him with renewed vigor, sharing innovative ideas and personal anecdotes that challenged the status quo. The pulse of the office shifted toward a collective heartbeat, intertwined with inspiration. Yet amidst this blossoming, John felt an unresolved tension with Margaret steadily intensifying. With every positive update he shared, her dismissive remarks reminded him of the potential pitfalls ahead. He could sense her twice-weekly critiques sharpening, questioning the authenticity of the changes. Even amid progress, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was preparing to exploit any misstep. His own leadership style was under scrutiny now, not just by Margaret, but by himself. Was this bold approach the right path, or was he courting failure by reaching for greatness? Each night, he returned home wrestling with thoughts of self-doubt and obligation. In moments of solitude, a reflection emerged: was he truly committed to risking everything for this vision, or was he merely a veneer of a leader who barricaded himself against authenticity? As he looked at the whiteboard filled with ideas, stories, and hopeful plans, he realized that if he wanted to lead authentically, he needed to act decisively. This chapter of his journey was merely beginning, but he had to be prepared to confront the inevitable backlash the moment when his ideas would face the ultimate test. With Margaret likely preparing another showdown, the stakes would soon elevate. But could he fortify his foundation enough to absorb the blow? The moment of confrontation was near, and he steeled himself for the conflict ahead, knowing every decision would either cement his pathway forward or unravel everything he had bravely built. The day dawned with an unexpected chill that sent a shiver down John's spine as he entered the office. It wasn't merely the cold air, it was the frigid anticipation of the day ahead, laden with the promise of confrontation. The air felt electric, charged by the unsung questions hovering in the space between illusion and reality. His feet carried him to the conference room, where he prepared for a pivotal meeting with the senior management team. Every ounce of enthusiasm he had cultivated in his team needed to translate into organizational advocacy. As employees filtered in, he attempted to maintain a composed demeanor but felt the weight of Margaret's critical eye. She was omnipresent, lurking in the periphery, ready to challenge his every assertion. Sitting down, he engaged in small talk, deflecting questions about new initiatives with anecdotes that felt rehearsed. Inside, turmoil brewed. Did he really believe he could incite lasting change within the company? As he glanced around the room, meeting the uncertain eyes of his colleagues, self-doubt gnawed at him. Did they see him as a true leader, or merely a hopeful idealist firing into the void? When the time came to present, John launched into his pitch, carefully outlining the initiatives birthed from the storytelling sessions they had started. He spoke passionately about the changes unfolding, weaving in employee stories to humanize the corporate decisions. In the back of his mind, he steeled himself for Margaret's inevitable rebuttal, aware that her response could either galvanize his vision or bring it crashing down. Redirection began, and questions emerged from the group. Some praised his initiative, while others hesitated, echoing Margaret's skepticism. But how will these stories translate into real metrics? One of them pressed, tapping a finger against the table for emphasis. John's heart raced. This was at the shift in momentum he had feared. He felt the need to defend not just the projects but also his core beliefs. By embracing these narratives, we create a culture of empathy and authenticity. Engagement will grow, leading to improved productivity, retention, and innovation, he explained, his voice steadying as he leaned into conviction. Margaret's gaze bore into him, her smile thin and calculating. Interesting theory, John. But do you truly understand how to measure emotional engagement? Can you quantify feeling? The question hung heavily, a blatant challenge. For a split second, John's mind blanked. How could he quantify what felt so inherently qualitative? He frantically sifted through his thoughts, reaching for a deeper understanding of what he was proposing. He wasn't in this for fancy metrics, he was here to champion change. True, it's difficult to measure emotion, he replied, gathering strength. But it's not impossible. Employee feedback, consumer satisfaction surveys, and indeed, metrics of retention can layer to reflect the heart behind the numbers. Culture can't only be quantified, it must be felt. Margaret leaned back, eyes narrowing. And what happens when this culture you build proves to be ephemeral? When the reports don't reflect your vision? Will you be able to self-correct, or will you double down on your missteps? Her words stung, striking at a vulnerability he was trying to shield. What if he failed? That fear was a shadow he couldn't shake off. Yet he sensed a shift, the room felt heavier. Colleagues leaned in, sensing the tension, the stakes defined by Margaret's implications. With the meeting adjourned, John felt as though he had emerged from a battlefield, sparks of fear and determination igniting within him. If he were to navigate this minefield of doubt, he realized he couldn't just rely on instinct, he needed strategy and allyship. He'd have to confront not only Margaret's skepticism but his own doubts head-on. In the midst of this inner tumult, an email notification blinked in the corner of his screen. It was from Leslie again. I believe in you. Lead with your heart, and the numbers will follow. Simple yet piercing words that stirred something deep within him, a reminder that his authenticity could open doors he hadn't yet seen. As he left the office that evening, a surge of resolve flooded him. Did he have the courage to stake it all on an unquantifiable vision? The answer unfolded within a fire ignited, warmth amid the frost. But what if Margaret's influence was stronger than an individual's resilient spirit? As he stepped into the biting wind, he glanced back toward the corporate fortress of doubt. Was this the beginning of renaissance or the precipice of downfall? The answers lurked in the shadows, waiting to surface amidst challenges ahead. The moment had come to refine his approach, for change was a battle, and he was armed with no less than his own conviction. And as the night deepened, he pondered, could one small plea resonate against the indifference of the corporate machine? Would his own courage ignite the spark of transformation, or was he merely a player in a game where the rules favored the status quo? The choices ahead loomed ominously, yet he felt a flicker of hope amidst the uncertainty, never knowing how far one moment of clarity could reach. John Matthews found himself standing at the very threshold of change, poised to confront the lingering shadows of his past. The morning sun streamed through his office windows, illuminating the stark reality of his choices. He had transformed from a man encased in layers of corporate ambition to one bursting with purpose. It was time to solidify that transformation. During the previous weeks, John had made significant strides in fostering a culture of empathy within his organization. Employees who once moved unseen in the corridors were now voicing their stories, their experiences blending into a vibrant tapestry that captured the essence of the company's heartbeat. Yet Margaret's skepticism lingered, her pointed questions still echoing in his mind. Could he truly balance profitability with humanity? He sat at his desk, mind racing through a blueprint for the board meeting ahead. The agenda was clear: to present a new strategy that integrated employee narratives within their corporate framework without sacrificing financial prudence. A risk, yes, but a calculated one. He had spent nights crafting figures and forecasts, intertwining them with the personal stories he had gathered. This was his moment to prove that compassion could indeed coexist with profitability. As he walked into the boardroom, the familiar faces of his colleagues greeted him, each a reflection of the delicate dance he was about to undertake. The air buzzed with anticipation, and John felt a surge of confidence wash over him. He had not only prepared compelling data but also articulated a vision that spoke to the heart of the organization's purpose. Thank you all for being here today, he began, his voice steady. Today's meeting is pivotal, marking a turning point in how we conceive of our corporate identity. We're not simply a business, we're a community. The board members exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. John pressed forward, weaving in the stories of employees who felt the weight of layoffs personally, the burden family members shouldered, and their resilience in the face of adversity. The more he spoke, the more he felt those stories resonate like a warm melody among critical notes. Margaret's brow furrowed, but he didn't waver. This is not merely about emotional engagement, it's about our sustainability as a company. When employees feel valued, their productivity soars. Our initiatives will prioritize both human dignity and financial success. Here it was his passion mingling with reason. The room began to shift as he presented tangible frameworks for integrating employee input into decision-making. He outlined regular engagement forums, opportunities for feedback, and metrics crafted around personal stories alongside financial benchmarks. But John, how do you plan to address the possible backlash? Margaret interrupted, her tone sharp as she continued to probe. John knew this moment would come. It was inevitable that he would face skepticism from the person who thrived on corporate scrutiny. We stand at the crux of innovation, Margaret. If we don't evolve, we risk becoming obsolete. The world is changing rapidly, and our approach to leadership must reflect that shift. This is more than just theory. It's a strategic pivot toward longevity, and I'm ready to lead that charge. A challenge hung in the air, but John noticed subtle nods of approval among his colleagues, people he once viewed as detractors now revealing themselves as potential allies. You have my support, Samantha spoke up, her voice tinged with conviction. I've seen the changes firsthand. Employee morale has improved significantly since we began this initiative. Encouraged, John turned back to the board. Let us be trailblazers. Let us show the market that emotional intelligence is not a weakness but a sign of strong leadership. A shift like this will not only inspire our workforce but also resonate with customers increasingly drawn to companies that demonstrate integrity and responsibility. The conversation flowed, and the initial skepticism began to melt away like morning frost. One by one, members of the board began to voice their own concerns he was now equipped to address. They discussed potential pitfalls and risk factors, but each objection was met with a solution grounded in the shared stories that gave life to the numbers. Eventually, the meeting reached its climax as John proposed a pilot program, a direct intervention designed to measure the impact of empathy-centered policies on morale and productivity. If we sense discomfort or setbacks, we can recalibrate. But let us take this first step and showcase the results to reshape our strategic vision. We owe it to our people, to the ones who make this company thrive. What followed was an unexpected swell of support that struck John like a glimmer of hope cutting through the fog of uncertainty. The decision was unanimous. The board voted in favor of implementing the pilot program, cementing the significance of empathy in their corporate strategy. Exiting the boardroom, John felt lighter, weightless, as if someone had untethered him from the shackles of doubt. He had not merely transcended expectations, he had affirmed a new paradigm of leadership that married accountability and compassion. In the weeks that followed, John watched as the change began to ripple through the company. Employee engagement sessions flourished, initiatives meaningful to the team sparked innovative ideas, and productivity climbed as teams collaborated with newfound fervor. He reveled in the realization that these efforts led to a numerical success too. Profits rose as morale soared. John had accomplished what once seemed insurmountable. He had conquered the dichotomy of profitability and empathy, proving through action that a leader must first serve. Looking back at the journey from the child who had felt the pulse of struggle to a man now recognized for transformative leadership, he found fulfillment not just in professional success, but in the genuine connections and stories that had shaped that success. He had become a leader who turned potential loss into profound opportunity. As he looked at Grace's snowman, a memory of hope encapsulated beneath the snow, he understood his purpose: to ensure that every child's dreams remained within reach, wrapped in the warmth of opportunities he would create. The road ahead was bright, and with the company embarking on a new chapter, he knew he would continue driving change anchored in compassion. Now it's your turn to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support this channel, because true fans of overcoming stories understand the impact of these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share.